Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Varsha Deshpande and I welcome you to this video in which I'm going to be talking about some of the very basic and elementary ideas in the preamble to the Constitution of India. Now the word preamble by itself means an introduction. So what does the preamble to the Constitution of India do? It introduces a reader to the aims and objectives of this Constitution. And therefore, friends, whether all of us are students of law or not, by virtue of the very fact that we hold the office of being the citizens of this great nation, we need to be informed about some of the very basic and fundamental ideas relating to the vision behind the framing of this monumental document called as the Constitution of India. So our Constitution begins with a very small yet beautifully drafted paragraph which is called as the preamble to our Constitution. Now what does this preamble basically do? In a nutshell, it tries to tell a reader about what kind of a constitution this is. So, even without browsing through the detailed provisions and the articles within the text of the Constitution, if one reads this preamble, one gets a brilliant idea about what kind of a constitution this is. Now, if we concentrate on the text of this preamble, the preamble to India's Constitution begins with the very, very powerful words. And those words are, we the people of India. Now, what is the strength that these words, we the people of India, have? When we begin the text of the Constitution with these words, we the people of India, the point that we are trying to signify here is that, look, our Constitution, our basic document of governance, is not gifted to us by any foreign authority or any power. This is a constitution which we have given to ourselves. So, the very opening words in the text to the Constitution of India try to demonstrate, they try to point out to us the essentially indigenous nature of this constitution. It's quite true that we have adopted a number of features from various different constitutions of the world. But what we need to remember here is that what concept should we adopt from where? What kind of modifications do we bring about in the concept that we have adopted? All these have been our own indigenous autonomous choices. So we begin the text of the Constitution by saying, we the people of India. So it's trying to say that, look, the source of all authority under this Constitution lies in we the people of India. Then it says, we the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into what? Now there are 5 defining characteristics that the preamble spells out in describing the nature of polity that we have established by virtue of this Constitution. So how does it describe the nature of polity? It says we have constituted India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. Now, if one looks at the original preamble which was there in the Constitution that came into force in the year 1950, remember the original preamble described India to be a sovereign democratic republic, which means these two words, secular and socialist, which we happen to see in the text of the preamble today, they were not there in the original preamble that came with the Constitution of 1950. But though these words were not there, we of course in our philosophy were always very, very secular. These words secular and socialist they came to be added into the text of the preamble by the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976. Now, if we cast our attention on these 5 different characteristics of our polity that the preamble emphasizes on, let's look at the first one, which is sovereign. It says we have established India as a sovereign state. Now, what does the word sovereign signify? Sovereign basically means supreme power. So once again, what we are trying to tell ourselves is that where is the supreme power located in our country? We say that, look, supreme power in this country lies in the hands of we, the people of India. Now, there are various ways in which one can understand the idea of sovereignty. One basic significance for India to declare herself to be a sovereign state, we cannot forget that India is a country that was a British colony, which was governed by the Britishers for so many years. Now, in 1947, when we got independence from the British rule, and in 1950, when India, made a constitution of her own, with the description of India as a sovereign state, we made an official declaration to the world that, look, hereafter, India does not owe allegiance to any foreign power or authority. India does not need to bow down to the authority of any foreign crown or any foreign power. Now, when we understand the concept of sovereignty, as I said, there are various dimensions in which we can look at it. For example, let's try and understand internal sovereignty versus external sovereignty. Now, when I talk of internal sovereignty, what I'm trying to signify is that, what kind of laws can be enacted within this country? What kind of policies do we want for the people of India? All these shall remain our autonomous choices. This cannot be dictated to us by any other foreign power. So internally, we are sovereign. When I talk of external sovereignty, on the other hand, I'm trying to tell myself that, look, what kind of relations should India maintain with any other foreign power? What kind of treaties do we want to become a part of, and what kind of treaties and conventions we want to keep ourselves away from? All these shall be our own decisions. That's what I mean when I talk of external sovereignty. Now look at another dimension of it. For example, when I talk of popular sovereignty versus political sovereignty. When I say popular sovereignty, I'm once again trying to emphasize that within our democratic setup, in whose hands does the supreme power lie? The supreme power lies in the hands of we, the people of India. So it is the people of this nation who are actually sovereign. But then let's realize that sovereignty, cannot remain scattered over masses. And because it cannot remain scattered over masses, what we actually do is we institutionalize the sovereign power. So, when we created the political institution like the legislature, what did we do? The sovereign power which we as the people of this country possess, we transferred our power into the hands of our representatives whom we elected in the legislature. That's what we mean when I talk of political sovereignty. So sovereignty can be understood in these different senses that I am trying to emphasize. Now let's look at the second idea contained in the text of the preamble, which says India is sovereign socialist. Now, socialism is a concept which basically emphasizes on the idea of economic equality. So, when we say that we are a polity that is committed to the idea of socialism, what ultimately we are trying to emphasize is that, look, this will be a polity where our objective, our goal would be to achieve economic equality amongst the masses. So it signifies, an attempt towards the creation of a classless society. So we say we want India to become a society where you would not have classes like the class of the rich and the class of the poor. You would not have classes like the economic haves and the economic have-nots. But then, when we say that we are a socialist regime, the question is, have we been able to produce such a society? The answer, of course, is no. Then how do we understand this commitment to socialism? The thing is that when we accept hardcore socialism, then what we really need to do is we need to actually completely nationalize entire business within the country. But then when we framed our constitution, by 1950, when the constitution came into force, let's understand that private entrepreneurship had already by then formed a large part of the country's economy. And, with this constitution, we had created a newly born democratic state. When the constitution came into force, we were a country that were gripped with probably 100 problems that were there. So there was communal violence that came with partition. Then there was problem of poverty, unemployment, problem of women, problem of the backward classes. So we had these number of problems in the midst of which a newly born democracy had come into being. Now at this stage, if we would have said that, look, we want to completely nationalize the entire business in the country, then our entire economy would probably have miserably collapsed. And that's the reason why we could not completely nationalize, but at the same time our objective was that, look, few years down the line, we would want to create a classless society in India. So we, settled on a midway balance. And that midway golden means was the means of a mixed economy. Today, of course, however, with our economy having gone open and liberalization and globalization and privatization having become the norm of the day, admittedly, complete socialism is a far-off ideal. And that's the reason why probably, we had some voices coming up a few years ago which said that, look, we need to amend the preamble once again and remove this word socialist therefrom, which we had deliberately added by means of the 42nd Amendment Act. So we said so far that India is sovereign, it's socialist. The third word contained there, which was also added by means of an amendment in 1976, is the word secular. Now, having said this before, let me emphasize it once again, that though the word secular was not there in the text of the Constitution in the text of the preamble till the year 1976, it did not mean that till then we were not secular. Because the provisions contained in the articles of our Constitution did point to a very emphatic secular philosophy. Now, what does the word secularism really imply? In the constitutional sense, the word secularism stands for two important postulates. Number one, it says that the state shall not declare any religion to be the official religion of the state, which means that the Indian government can't make an official declaration that, look, we are a Hindu government, we are a Muslim government, we are a Christian government. So what secularism demands is that there must be a complete separation between the state and religion. So it demands complete state neutrality in matters of religion. That's the first postulate of secularism. The second postulate of secularism says that the state is bound to treat all religions as equal. So the state as the governing body is not entitled to discriminate on grounds of religion. So, it can't say, for example, that, look, all facilities we are going to give to promote a particular religion A, and all other religions we're not going to pay attention to. We're not going to give any facilities to that. Or the government of India can't say that, all proceeds that we receive from the taxes paid by the people are going to be appropriated for the growth and promotion of a particular religion. So what secularism primarily demands is separation between state and religion. But while we say this, while we talk about neutrality of the state in matters of religion and separation between the state and religion, we need to understand one fundamental point, that secularism does not mean irreligion. It does not mean that if a particular state is secular, it doesn't believe in the concept of religion at all. In fact, if a state is secular, it basically means that the state believes in the idea of religion. It not just believes in the idea of religion, it wants religion to thrive and flourish. And remember, we are a pluralist nation. India is a country where there are diverse religions, diverse cultures. And if we want the identity of each of these to survive, if we want each of these religions to flourish, then probably secularism is the only option that was there for India. And today, of course, the court has very emphatically held that secularism is a part of the unamendable basic structure of the Constitution. So that's how we understand the secular nature of the Indian polity. So we said India is sovereign, socialist, secular. Now the fourth idea contained therein is, of course, of far-reaching significance, and we say India is what? We say India is a democracy. Now, democracy is an idea that all of us have probably grown up with. We've grown up with an understanding of Abraham Lincoln's famous description or formulation of democracy as a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. That means the point that we are trying to convey is that democracy basically stands for a model of government which believes in the people at large. It is a people-centric model of governance. So what is of primary importance in a democracy is the people who constitute the democracy. Now, if we are to go a little beyond this, let's try and understand that, when we adopted democracy as a way of life, democracy basically manifests itself at several levels in India. Like, for example, when I talk of universal adult franchise, the fact that all of us go to the polls and decide who's going to form the government, we are talking of democracy that manifests itself at the political level. So, at the level of formation of the government, it is the people who participate in the process of election, and they have the choice to decide who will come into the seat of power. Apart from this political level, however, let's also realize and understand that the thrust of democracy lies in the fact that we guarantee certain cardinal liberties and freedoms to the individuals within this polity. Like, for example, all of us as citizens of India enjoy the freedom of speech and expression. Let's understand, the freedom of speech and expression is the very oxygen of a democracy. So I am able to express my ideas and views freely and fearlessly. Why are we given that liberty? We are given that liberty primarily because we are a democracy. We enjoy the freedom of assembly. We enjoy the freedom of association. All these are examples of democracy manifesting itself at the social level as well. Now, when we talk about democratic model of governance, when we say that the model of governance in India is democratic, what do I expect out of democratic governance? There are three things primarily that I would want to talk about. The first one, when I say we have a democracy, the kind of governance that I expect is transparent governance. I want the government to be transparent in all its affairs and dealings. Here probably we've made a very marked transition or a very marked shift, because earlier, if you would look at the model of governance, earlier secrecy was the norm, openness was an exception. So, the government would find it to be its prerogative to keep all affairs secret. But today, if you go to look at it, this equation becomes exactly reverse, because openness in governmental affairs is the rule, secrecy is an exception. Remember, with the enactment of the Right to Information Act, we now consider it to be the right of every individual within this country to seek information from the government as a matter of my right. Only certain things which have been expressly excluded from the scope of the Right to Information Act are matters in relation to which I cannot seek information from the government. So maybe, for example, I can't ask the government to give me its defense statistics. That's something that is excluded from the purview of my right to information. So with the enactment of the Right to Information Act, we have taken a major step towards ensuring transparency in the affairs of the government. Now, when I talk of this first thing, that is, in a democratic governance, how do I want the governance to be? I want the governance to be transparent. The second thing that I expect from the government is logically connected to the first one. I want governance to be accountable. I need information on all affairs from the government. Why do I need that information? So that with the help of that information, I can make the government answerable and accountable for whatever it does or for whatever that it does not do. So, accountability remains a very, very important feature of democratic governance. I am able to make the government answerable. So, remember, whenever we are talking about a democracy, the holders of public power will have to be made publicly accountable for all that they do while they are in power. So, let's look at the parliament, for example. The opposition putting questions and supplementary questions to the members of the ruling party on the floor of the House. This is an example of the executive being accountable to the legislature. Or let's look at, people going to the polls every 5 years. So, if I feel that the present government of the day has not functioned the way we had expected it to, I am entitled to cast my vote in favor of just another party at the next poll. This is a classic example of the government of the day being made accountable to the people. And finally, of course, we know of this powerful mechanism through which we make the government accountable to the judiciary. So if the government does something that is against the law, does something against the mandate of the Constitution, we as the people can knock the doors of the court and make the government accountable to the courts of law. So when I talk about democratic governance, I am expecting the government to be accountable and answerable. This is the second feature of democratic governance. The third and the very important feature of democratic governance is that in a democracy, I expect governance to be participative. That's the hallmark of a democracy. That, this is a kind of government where people participate in the process of governance. So basically, we are trying to tell ourselves that within a democracy, you cannot have complete unilateralism on the part of the government. So the government can't keep commanding what it wants. People equally participate in the process of governance. Now, one way of understanding participative governance is, at the basic level, where I say that all people of this country go to the polls and elect leaders of their choice. And so we decide who's going to form the government. By doing this somewhere, we are participating in that process. But going even beyond this point of simply participating at the level of deciding who's going to form the government, even after the government is formed, all the things that the government does by using the power that it has. Suppose I do not like what the government of the day is doing. I have the entitlement to raise my voice and criticize the government for that. I can, hold a public meeting trying to tell people how wrong the government is behaving and doing this. So by doing this, we are somewhere participating in the process of governance. Today if you see Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha, which are the two important houses of the parliament, they have their independent websites where they invite popular comments, popular suggestions and recommendations from the people for certain bills that are tabled before the parliament. So, when they invite the opinion of the people about what they think in relation to this bill which is there before the parliament, by inviting those suggestions, we are taking a step towards participative governance. So people, though tacitly or indirectly, are actually participating in this process of governance. That's the hallmark of a democracy. Democratic regimes are those regimes that are governed by the principle of rule of law. So, when we say, look at it literally, rule of law regime is a regime in which it is the law that rules, not men who rule. So, commitment to rule of law is a very, very important dimension of a democracy. Now coming back to the text of the preamble, it says, we constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. Now on the 26th of January 1950, when this constitution came into force, we declared to the world that, look, we are a republic. Now, what does a republic mean? A republic means where the head of the state is an elected representative of the people. So, our head of the state, head of the Indian Union, is the President of India. And the President's office is an elected office. Though, of course, like the United States of America, we as the people do not go to directly elect the President. He is elected through indirect elections, but the office of the President is nonetheless an elected office. We need to contrast a republic from a monarchy. In monarchy, the head of the state is the crown. But who would become the next crown is never decided through the process of elections. It is decided through hereditary lineage. So Britain, a country which governed us, which ruled us for such a long period of time, Britain is a monarchy. But when we framed our constitution and we became sovereign and independent, we constructed or made India into a republic. So the head of our state, being an elected representative, we describe India as a republic. So coming once again to the text of the preamble, it says, we are sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. Now these are the defining characteristics of the nature of polity that we have established under this constitution. Now ahead of this, what does the preamble say? It says, and securing to all its citizens justice, socio-economic and political. Now here it is talking about some of the values that India cherishes. It says we want to secure to all our citizens socio-economic and political justice. Now remember, justice is a transcendental idea. Like Dr. Amartya Sen says in his wonderful book, The Idea of Justice, he says there's nothing like perfect justice. So, you can never ever have a state in which there is perfect justice. But nonetheless, our constitution's commitment to socio-economic and political justice is simply trying to bring home the fact that this is the higher parameter, this is the higher standard to which we will always strive to subscribe. So it says we secure to our people social, economic, and political justice. Then ahead of that, the preamble emphasizes on three very, very cardinal values, and those values are liberty, equality, and fraternity. Now, these three ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, they are, kind of integrally connected conceptions under the preamble. Now, let's look at the concept of liberty. Liberty signifies the zone of freedom that is guaranteed to all of us as individuals within this country. So it says liberty of thought, belief, faith, expression, and worship. Now remember, when we are talking about liberty, liberty points to that zone of our activity where the law chooses to leave us alone. So the state is not going to intervene into that domain, though of course no freedom under any regime can be allowed to remain absolute. But barring that area of restriction, all individuals have freedom, is what the concept of liberty signifies. That's again a cardinal requirement of a democratic regime. Then, having spoken of liberty, the preamble says it guarantees to all citizens equality of status and of opportunity. Now, we need to understand that liberty, equality, and fraternity, as I said, they are mutually reinforcing ideas. It would make no sense if we were to talk about them individually without the support of each other. So, let's look at it this way. Without equality, what would liberty be? Probably without equality, liberty would degenerate into a license, a prerogative for a selected few. Without liberty, what would equality be? It would be meaningless because it would not furnish us with any opportunity for self-development, for individual creativity, or for individual initiative. And then, having spoken of liberty and equality, the Constitution very consciously, the preamble talks about the idea of fraternity. Fraternity pointing to the spirit of brotherhood, without which, again, liberty and equality become meaningless for a nation as a whole. So it says, while we are cultivating or we are guaranteeing equality and liberty to all individuals within this country, we are also wanting to cultivate the spirit of fraternity. Without fraternity, as Dr. Ambedkar said in the Constituent Assembly, without fraternity, liberty and equality would not remain a natural course of things at all. So liberty, equality, fraternity that the Constitution talks about, they are to be looked at collectively and together. And later ahead of fraternity, there are again important things that the preamble talks about. It says, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. Now look at these two different ideas. When I talk about dignity of the individual, remember the preamble's focus is on the individual there. So within this nation, within this polity, we assure dignity to every individual. So that's an idea, an assurance at the level of individual. But immediately next to that, coupled with that, the preamble says unity and integrity of the nation. So that's the collective idea of the state. So while at the individual level, you're creating an environment where an individual is allowed to thrive, an individual is allowed to flourish through assurances of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. You uphold the dignity of the individual and at the same time assure that you stand as one collective whole. And that is where the preamble is talking about unity and integrity of the nation. So, the moment you assure dignity to the individuals within the country, the moment you are securing to all of them liberty, equality, and fraternity, that is where you will be able to have the collective idea of unity and integrity of the nation. Today you are seeing in the emerging constitutional jurisprudence that we come across today, there are expanding horizons of individual dignity that we can clearly make out. Look at Navtej Singh Johhar's judgment of the Supreme Court, where it decriminalizes homosexuality. Now, in doing that, the Supreme Court is giving an emphatic meaning to dignity of the individual. It is upholding the dignity of these individuals, and that is what the preamble focuses on. And then, coming to the last part of the preamble as to what it prescribes ahead of all this, it says, in the Constituent Assembly on this, the 26th day of November 1949. Now, in the context of the Constitution, there are two dates of great importance that we have to keep in mind. One is the 26th of November 1949, which we describe as the date of adoption of the Constitution. Of late, nowadays, this day is celebrated as the Constitution Day, where according to the directives of the Government of India, you do have collective reading of the preamble to the Constitution at all public places. So, 26th of November 1949 is the date of adoption of the Constitution, because this was the date when the President of the Constituent Assembly put his signature on the original text to the Constitution of India. So, this is the date of adoption. And 26th of January 1950 is the date of commencement of the Constitution. Because the Constitution as a composite whole, as a complete document, came into operation, it came into force throughout the territory of India on the 26th of January 1950. So the preamble says, in the Constituent Assembly on this, the 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. So now it's saying, this is the day we adopted the Constitution. We hereby enact this Constitution. Here comes another element relating to the importance of the preamble. One, we already said that the preamble introduces a reader to the aims, objectives, and vision of this Constitution. But let's remember, the preamble also contains the enacting clause of this Constitution. So we adopt, enact, and now look at the last words. It says, give to ourselves this Constitution. So, it lands at the same point where it had taken off. We started off with we the people of India, and the preamble concludes by saying, we give to ourselves this Constitution. Once again, emphatically pointing out there that this is a Constitution which we have given to ourselves. It is not something that the British Parliament gifted to us. It is not something that any other foreign authority gave it to us. It is a Constitution which we have framed and we have given to ourselves. So, in Keshavanand Bharati's case, the question that came up before the court was that, is this preamble also a part and parcel of the Constitution? And the court does answer the question in the positive by saying that the preamble is as much a part of the Constitution as probably any of its other provisions or the articles to the Constitution are. Now, this is the beautifully drafted opening paragraph of our Constitution called as the preamble. As a great legal scholar of this country, Nani Palkhiwala said, he said, what is the preamble? He says, preamble is the identity card of the Constitution. So, just like a small identity card in absolute brevity of words tells you all basics about the person who is the holder of the card, similarly, this preamble tells you all basic fundamentals about the kind of Constitution that this is. And in an amazing economy of words, it brings out to you in a beautiful manner the nature of the polity that we have created. So this is the brief elementary discussion that I had wanted to indulge into in terms of looking at the preamble to the Constitution of India. I hope this video has equipped you with some of the basic and fundamental ideas relating to the text of the preamble of India's Constitution. Should you have anything to add to this or have some questions to clarify, do let me know in the comments section. Thank you very much for watching this video.
For more such informative topics on constitutional law, please like this video and subscribe our channel.